Thank you for showing up to the first session of our Certified Beer Server Prep Talk. We're going to be talking about flavor, taste, and aroma today. So it's very exciting to see so many people tuning in. Thank you for showing up. This is the first in a series of 12 different talks. We're going to be doing a series of informational videos designed to help you boost your beer knowledge and prepare you to take the Certified Beer Server exam. My name is Neil Witte. I'm going to be doing all 12 of these sessions with you. I am going to be broadcasting from right here where I've been for several weeks, and I will be for several more. I'm a Master Cicerone. I am the lead trainer and a content developer for Cicerone Certification Program. I've been in the beer business for 23 years, doing education and quality work and a number of different things. Started as a brewer many years ago. But we're going to be talking about flavor, taste, and aroma today in this first session. So these sessions are going to take place every Tuesday and Thursday at 1 p.m. Central Time through the end of May. So the last one is going to be on May 28th. After the talk, we're going to be posting some review questions, and I think that link is probably up on the page right now. We're going to have some review questions that are there to help you follow along, and we're going to post those on our Cicerone blog. You can access the blog through the link on this page, or you can navigate to the cicerone.org website, and there's a link to that blog at the top of the page. There won't be answers included in that, but we'll post the answers to those questions at the beginning of the next session on Thursday. So give you a chance to kind of review and quiz yourself a little bit on a handful of questions. So if you want to see more cool content from Cicerone, hit the subscribe button below and subscribe to our channel. We've got lots of fun stuff going on. An interesting and fun aspect of what we're doing in these sessions is that in each session, we're going to be giving away 10 certified beer server exams to 10 different people. So if you want to register and sign up for a chance to win a free certified beer server exam, we'll be giving 10 of them away at each session. So at the beginning of the Q&A session for today, we're going to be posting a link to a questionnaire. So that link is going to be, that link will take you to a questionnaire, and you'll fill out that questionnaire, and that will enter you for a chance to win the exam. So if you are already a certified beer server, we'd ask that you kind of leave those opportunities for a free exam to the people who aren't already certified beer servers. And also, we're going to be keeping log, of course, of the people who win, so you can only win one time. So if you win today, then don't enter next time, because you can only win once. So that's a nice little bonus for you guys. So what's on tap for today? We're going to be talking about flavor, taste, and aroma, how aroma and taste come together to create this thing called flavor. We're going to talk about how you can use this knowledge to be a better beer taster. But before we get too far into that, I want to talk a little bit about the Cicerone certification program in general. Since this is our first session, I thought I'd tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. So the Certified Cicerone, Cicerone certification program is made up of 4 different levels. We've got 4 levels of examination. The first level is the Certified Beer Server exam. So this is a 60-question exam that you take online. You have 30 minutes to take it, and this establishes a certain baseline of knowledge about beer. So that's the first level of examination. Second level is certified Cicerone. Certified Cicerone, in order to become a certified Cicerone, you have to take an in-person 4-hour exam. There's a written portion that is multiple choice, short answer questions, and some essay questions. There's also a tasting portion of the exam and a demonstration portion of the exam. Level 3 is Advanced Cicerone. This is an in-person exam that's a day long, consisting of short answer and essay questions, tastings, and oral exams. And then Master Cicerone is a 2-day exam that is all essay questions, oral exams, and tasting exams. So it's increasing difficulty as you progress through the program. And so CBS really is just the first step in your journey through the Cicerone certification program. And you know, certified beer server is the title, but this really isn't just for beer servers. This is really something good for any beer professional. If you work in the beer business in any capacity, this is a great title to have. It's a great exam to take. It's a great goal to set to learn more about beer. It's also really great if you're just a beer enthusiast, if you like to drink beer and you want to know more about beer and you want to prove to other people that you know a little bit more about beer. Study and take the certified beer server exam. So it's really just for anybody who wants to be more conversant in beer styles, in beer flavor, and in the knowledge of proper handling and service of beer. So the program in general covers 5 broad areas. The first is beer, the brewing ingredients and brewing process. Second is beer styles, and then we have keeping and serving. We have beer and food pairing and flavor evaluation. So each one of these areas is focused on in an increasing manner as you progress through the program. So each level goes into greater depth with those areas. So we're going to be focusing on some different areas each week. And it's important to note that with the certified beer server level, we don't put an emphasis on the brewing ingredients and process or on the beer and food pairing portions. So we focus more on the other 3 portions. But today, we're going to focus a little bit more on the flavor basics. So to understand flavor, you really need to understand how flavor is constructed. It's really a construct of 2 different senses that come together to create this this thing that a lot of us understand to be one particular sense. So it's made up of taste and aroma. So let's look at these individually. When we talk about taste, we're talking about a sense that is fairly limited. Taste is what you detect from your tongue, obviously. When you put food or when you put liquid or a beverage in your mouth, when you put beer in your mouth, there is a chemical reaction that's happening on your taste buds, and your taste buds sends a signal to your brain that it's tasting something. But there's really only 6 different things that it can detect. Those 6 things are sweet, sour, salty, bitter, umami. Umami, if you're not familiar with umami, is kind of like savory. Umami-rich foods include things like mushrooms, seaweed, and soy sauce, for example. And then the 6th addition to the taste family is fat. Fat's a relatively new addition. Several years ago, there was a pretty definitive study that was released that showed that fat is something that is detected by your taste buds as an individual taste. So it is the 6th taste. So when your taste buds react with something in your mouth and send that signal to your brain, it's sending a signal saying, I am detecting 1 or more of these 6 basic tastes. And that's it. There's no taste bud sending a signal saying, I'm tasting strawberries, or there's no chocolate signal or steak or whatever it is, right? It's just those 6 basic things. The balance of of the rest of what makes up true flavor, all comes from aroma. What you're getting in your nose through your olfactory receptors. Those olfactory receptors, the receptors in your nose and in your sinuses, those are what's doing a lot of the heavy lifting for flavor. So at the same time, when you're taking that drink of beer and that's having that chemical reaction on your tongue, your taste buds are sending signals to your brain. I'm tasting sweet, or I'm tasting bitter, or whatever it might be. At the same time, there are volatile aromas that are coming off the beer. And this happens with the food or whatever else you're eating or drinking. Volatile aromas are coming off of that, and they travel up through your sinus passages and the connection between your sinus passages and the back of your throat. And those aromas stimulate the olfactory receptors, and then those receptors send another signal to your brain. Now, these receptors can detect tens of thousands of different compounds. So this is where your strawberry and your chocolate and your grilled steak come from, right? So as those olfactory receptors are sending those signals, your brain is interpreting those and reading into this catalog of tens of thousands of different things that you have in your brain for aroma. But your brain is interpreting that signal as coming from your mouth. And this is what creates that illusion of flavor. So that flavor, most people are ingrained and are just have, from the time they were children, just brought up to think that all of this sensory information is coming from your mouth. But a good portion of it is coming from your nose and your sinus passages. So there's a really interesting test that you can do to demonstrate that disconnect, or the connection, as it were, between aroma and taste that makes up flavor. So if this were an in-person class, I would probably have a bag of jelly beans or a bag of Skittles or some fruity candy, and I would hand everybody one, and we would do this little test. And I don't have any fruity candy here, but I do have one, and I'm going to just demonstrate this, and you can do this on your own, or maybe you have fruity candy with you. But what I have with me is a little dried cherry, which will do the trick just fine. So what you do is you take this little piece of candy, or the cherry in this case, and you hold it in one hand, and the other hand you hold your nose, no air coming in or out. And then you take that candy, you put it in your mouth and chew it while you're holding your nose. And then while you're chewing it, you think about what you're tasting. Okay, I'm getting sweet and sour. That's it. But then while I'm chewing, I let go of my nose. Boom, there's the cherry. It didn't taste at all like cherry while I was holding my nose, but as I continue to chew and let go of my nose, then that's when I get the cherry. And I don't have to intentionally breathe out my nose or think about it in some way. It's just the natural airflow up in your sinus passages. And this is demonstrated just, on a regular basis if you have allergies, or if you have a cold or whatever, and if you get really stuffed up, you can't taste your food that well. That's why. And you probably know this on some, intuitively on some level, because as a child, many of you probably held your nose when you took cough medicine. Right? You didn't taste the cough medicine as much because you were holding your nose. You were preventing so much of that part of flavor being cut off. So, so knowing how those fit together, that allows us to go a little further into evaluating beer. So if you're in a position where you want to evaluate beer a little bit more specifically, beyond just putting back a few beers on a nice spring day, if you're preparing for a Cicerone exam, for example, if you want to evaluate beer and think about it a little bit more, there's some techniques we can use to help emphasize aroma. And so we can get a bigger picture of the true flavor of the beer. So the way that a basic tasting technique goes is the first thing that we'll do is swirl the beer a little bit. Swirling the beer releases aromas, releases carbonation, and that carbonation can assist in those aromas emerging from the glass. So this is going to present those aromas right up front so we can smell them better. And so after you give it a little swirl, you can go in and do a series of short sniffs, and then follow that up with a couple of long sniffs. All this is doing is stimulating olfactory receptors in different ways. Those combining short sniffs and long sniffs stimulate them in different ways and give you a better picture, a fuller picture of the true flavor. After you've evaluated the aroma, then you can start to taste the beer. Take a little sip, put it in your mouth, let it roll over your tongue. Put just enough in your mouth that it covers your tongue, not too much, not too little, and then you want to think about what you're tasting in addition to what you've been smelling. So it's important to note at this point that you want to be able to cover all portions of your tongue. And this isn't because there are certain parts of your tongue that are more sensitive to some tastes than others. It's more that just we want to stimulate as many of these taste buds as possible. So you might remember back in grade school, many of you probably saw something called the tongue map. And the tongue map was this diagram of the tongue that had different areas outlined that were more sensitive to different tastes. Like the back of your tongue was bitterness, and I think salty was on the front and sour was on the sides, I think. I don't even fully remember because I've tried really hard to put that thing out of my mind. Because to be honest with all of you, it's just simply not true. It was bad science from a long, long time ago that somehow ended up in every children's textbook in America and convinced everyone that some portions of their tongue were more sensitive to different tastes. We know now that all of your taste buds can detect all of the potential tastes. So we're going to take enough beer in our mouth to coat our tongues in order to get full coverage and get the fuller picture of the taste, stimulate as many taste buds as we can. So after we've evaluated the aroma and after we've evaluated the taste, we still want to think about some other aspects. There's one other important aspect of beer that we want to be evaluating. There's the aroma and the taste that make up that flavor, but part of that whole picture is what we call mouthfeel. Now, mouthfeel is, generally speaking, the sense of touch inside your mouth. It's a different sense that we're talking about. So some key aspects of that with beer would include things like carbonation. Carbonation provides a prickle or a tingle on your tongue. That is part of mouthfeel. Some beers are going to be more effervescent than others. They'll have a higher level of carbonation, and so they'll give you more of that prickle on your tongue. Another aspect that's very important to beer is body. Body is heavily influenced by the amount of sugar that is in the finished beer. There's some other factors that can play into body, but body basically is the viscosity of the beer, the thickness of it. So almost on a scale of, is it more like water or is it more like milk? That type of viscosity description. Another aspect of mouthfeel would be temperature. How cold is it? How warm is it? This is going to affect how you perceive the beer. Then there's some other aspects of mouthfeel that get more into the food side of things and are very rarely found in beers, only in very unusual types of beers. Things like capsaicin heat, spicy, chili heat, or like a minty coolness. Those are all considered mouthfeel aspects, although not necessarily as applicable to beers. So that is the basics of flavor. How flavor comes together with taste and aroma, and that in conjunction with mouthfeel are some of the things that you really want to focus on when you're tasting a beer and you want to evaluate a beer. You want to really figure out what is it about this beer and maybe come up with a good description of it, or if you're being examined on the beer. So with that being said, we will move on to answer a few questions, see if anybody has any questions about any of this. There should be a link to the survey posted very soon, if not already, at the bottom of the page. That survey, by the way, is going to be for those of you who are going to enter for the free certified beer server exam. So fill out that, click the link, fill out the survey, and you'll be entered to win one of 10 free certified beer server exams. We're going to be doing this every session, all 12 sessions. That link will be open for about an hour. So don't wait too long to fill that out. And so without further ado, I'm going to see if we've got any questions here. Okay. Are there any names of the techniques to evaluate beer? Well, I don't know if we have any really fancy names of the techniques. So there's one technique that we teach in a little bit advanced tasting that we call a retronasal, which would be where when you swallow that first taste of beer, when you breathe out your nose, that breathing out, the direction, the flow out of your nose, that's what we would call the retronasal, as opposed to when you breathe in, which is what we call the orthonasal. So those would be the only names that I would really associate with that. Another question, is alcohol or ethanol a taste? Well, yes, there are different types of alcohols. So alcohol can give us some different characteristics. For one, alcohol does have a certain flavor to it. Certain alcohols can have sometimes a type of almost sulfury characteristic and a whole flavor of their own. Alcohol can also provide a little bit of a warming mouthfeel, so it can kind of cross those boundaries a little bit. What about aftertaste? Is it really important to assess aftertaste in a beer? Well, aftertaste is all part of it. So you're thinking about the things you're getting right up front, you're thinking about the things you're getting in the middle, and you think about the things that you're getting at the end. Certain tastes and flavors are going to have a tendency to linger at the end. Most notably would be bitterness. So the bitterness in an IPA, for example, is something that is going to linger a little bit longer past some other flavors. So aftertaste isn't necessarily more important than anything else. It's just as important as evaluating all of the rest of beer's flavor. Can you cover the aroma techniques? Distant sniff, short sniff, long sniff, covered sniff. Okay, so this question gets at a little bit more advanced tasting technique. So I mentioned mixing up the short sniff and the long sniff. This is really kind of that first step in stimulating olfactory receptors in different ways. There are some compounds that, especially certain off flavors, one in particular is the light struck off flavor that smells skunky. That has a tendency, especially in a controlled setting, where if you have that compound in your beer, if you stick your nose in and take a big whiff right away, you'll get a little bit of it, and then all of a sudden you're overwhelming your olfactory receptors, and now you can't smell it anymore. And you have to almost step away and reset your olfactory receptors to get it again. Whereas if you're really looking for it, if you hold the beer at a distance, maybe hold it about a foot away and then smell it from a distance, then you're going to be able to get that aroma still without overwhelming your olfactory receptors. So that distant sniff can be very handy when you're trying to pick up certain compounds in a beer. And so then you can get closer and do the short sniffs and the long sniffs. And then, and sometimes you can put your hand over the top of the glass and swirl it a little bit. And then that'll release aromas and trap them in the headspace. And then you can smell it and get a more concentrated sense of the aroma. What else do we have here? Would acidity and astringency form a part of mouthfeel? So acidity is sour. So this acidity would be one of the basic tastes. Whereas astringency is a drying sensation. So that is that's considered to be a mouthfeel. So the best example of astringency is if you have oversteeped tea or dry red wine. The tannins from the grape skins in that dry red wine or that oversteeped tea present a drying sensation on your tongue. And that's more of a mouthfeel. Any tips for expanding your vocabulary to better describe aromas and flavors? Yeah, so there's some really good ways to expand your vocabulary. And, you know, so much of the vocabulary of aroma comes from comparing it to something you already know. It smells like this, or it smells like that. So the more you become familiar with the everyday things in life, and especially in the food and beverage world, the better off you're going to be. And that might sound kind of simplistic, but this could be as simple as if you're walking through the spice section in an open market, smelling different spices, or if you see some different herbs, smelling it. Oh, well, here's some oregano. Like, when was the last time you really took oregano and smelled it? Taking a minute and giving yourself that experience to really smell and sometimes taste individual items and think about it and try and process that, and taking the time to do that can kind of enter that into your memory, and it expands your vocabulary. And that's one of the best things that you can do to expand your vocabulary and thus your tasting ability. Does getting rid of carbonation allow you to have a better reading of the beer? Well, I would say no, because carbonation is an essential part of the beer. Carbonation enhances certain characteristics of beer. It enhances the bitterness of beer, and it can also enhance acidity in beer as well. And when you remove carbonation from beer, it leaves behind a little bit of an acrid taste that you don't normally taste when the bubbles are in the beer. So by removing carbonation, you're leaving behind a flavor that is now detectable in a way that it wasn't before. And you're taking away the emphasis that it had on some other characteristics of the beer. So you've by nature changed that beer. The best way to evaluate it is to evaluate it in as close to the state that the brewer intended as possible. Why is spiciness, capsaicin spicy, considered mouthfeel, whereas sourness and bitterness are considered taste? Well, that's a good question. You know, sourness and bitterness have been scientifically proven to be signals that are sent through your taste buds and the connection between the taste buds on your tongue and your brain. This has been scientifically proven. Whereas the capsaicin heat is something that's felt all over your mouth, and it's not just on your taste buds. I think a good example of this is if you've ever chopped up a jalapeno or a spicy chili, and you've got that all over your hands, and then you wipe your eyes, and then all of a sudden your eyes are burning. That's the same thing happening. So now your eyes are burning and your mouth is burning from the same stuff. That doesn't happen with acidity and these other characteristics. What beers are better to taste at warmer temperatures? Well, that's a good question. So a lot of this comes down to a matter of opinion, but there are some beers that are going to present themselves better when they're warmer. I would say in general, as any beer warms up, it's going to release more of its aromas. And then there are some fuller bodied beers, higher alcohol beers that are going to present better in general if they're served a little bit warmer. You know, some beers in the mid 40s and then other bigger, fuller bodied beers in the low to mid 50s. And then you have cask conditioned ales that, like you would find in the UK, the traditional cask ale in the UK is served around cellar temperature, which is in the low 50s Fahrenheit. So those, a cask conditioned beer would specifically need to be served at that warmer temperature. Can glass shapes affect flavor? Absolutely. Glass shape can affect your perception of the flavor. And I think the best example of this is a tulip-shaped glass. A tulip glass has a wide midsection, and that wide midsection gives, when you fill the glass with the beer to that midsection, you have more of a surface area exposed to the air, and then more volatile aromas are going to emerge from the beer. And then as the glass narrows near the top, those aromas will have a tendency to concentrate in that area. So it kind of traps those aromas in the headspace of the glass. And then you have that outward facing flare on the lip of the glass. And that's going to place the beer directly on the front of your tongue. So you're more likely to get a full coating over your tongue when you drink it, and thus a fuller picture of the beer. So you're getting more of the aroma, you're getting more of the taste, and a better picture of the flavor. Can you give a better description to umami? Are there any beers that demonstrate umami? So yeah, this is a good question too. You know, umami can be somewhat elusive. I mentioned mushrooms and soy sauce. You know, any dish that is going to use a lot of that, a lot of mushrooms or soy sauce is going to be umami rich. Savory is a good kind of alternate descriptor for umami. There are some beers that can exhibit an umami characteristic, but it's not a major player in a lot of beers. Oftentimes when umami starts to pop up in beer, it's in a kind of a negative sense. Some bottle conditioned beers that have a yeast sediment at the bottom, if they age for a very long time, too long, that yeast can die, and the cell, as the cells die, they release this kind of aroma and flavor that is very meaty and kind of umami rich. Not necessarily a very desirable characteristic. Okay, and I think that seems to be all of the questions so far. Yeah, I've got one suggestion here that that would I say that a Rauch beer has umami characteristics. I would say that would probably be a good example of a beer that has the potential to have some umami-like characteristics. Rauch beer is a smoke beer, and sometimes a smoke beer can, depending on how it's exhibited, can have a kind of meaty-like characteristic to it, and demonstrate some umami characteristics for sure. question about how appearance affects flavor. This is kind of a loaded question. I've seen my colleague Pat Fahey do a tasting before where he walked everybody through some basic flavor descriptions and had everybody taste, you know, a few different beers blind and asked them the types of flavors they were getting out of them, and then gave them a dark beer and had everybody raise their hand in the room. How many people got a roasty characteristic out of this dark beer? And you know, there were probably 150 people in the room. They all raised their hands, and it turned out that it was Sierra Nevada Pale Ale with dark food coloring in it. There was no roasty flavor at all, but everybody saw dark in that beer. They saw dark and they thought dark, and so they tasted roast because they're conditioned to have that association. So how a beer appears is going to influence your perception of it. Absolutely. Okay, well, I think that gets us to the end of our questions. So remember, if you want to get more cool content from Cicerone, click on the subscribe link at the bottom of the page and access a bunch of great Cicerone content. And I want to give everybody a reminder that this Wednesday, that's tomorrow at 4 p.m. Central, Pat Fahey, Master Cicerone Pat Fahey, is doing a tasting together session. This, I believe, is his fourth one, where he's going to spend an hour talking about a given beer style in the afternoon, tasting the beer along with you. This week, he's going to be tasting Kolsch beer. So I'll be there. I'll look forward to seeing all of you there. Thank you so much for showing up. I appreciate it, and we'll see you here at the same place and the same time on Thursday. Thanks a lot. Bye.